Welcome to MFA's single session workshop, This Will Knock Your Sockets Off Preview 2. In Preview 1, we created a very simple chat room application using Python's built-in socket library, but there were some limitations with that example. In terms of a chat room, we sent out a piece of information, but before we could send out another piece of information, we had to wait for a response to come back. To improve on that example, we want more of an asynchronous type of communication where, one person can send a lot of information without requiring a response back. Where at the other end, the person might receive a lot of information before sending their response back. Again, very analogous to texting on your phone. In order to, realize this type of application, we need to install a couple of extra libraries, Socket.io, Flask, and Flask Socket.io. We still need access to the command prompt, the terminal, some kind of editor so we can modify the example. And then obviously the more programming knowledge you have, the easier the examples will be. But hopefully you'll see the code is not a lot in order to make this magic happen. So let's get to it. So let's open up a couple windows here, which I've already navigated to the particular folder that has this. And just to kind of show you, I got two programs here, a server and a client. Oops. And let's execute the server on this side. Now the server in this example acts more like a switchboard operator, from old telephone times, where it's simply going to coordinate the conversation between its clients. But the server, just like a switchboard operator, could communicate with the clients directly as well. But again, we're not going to use that aspect of this communication link of the clients. So I got one program here serving as our first client. So let's go ahead and run that. And again, you're going to see a lot of information here. And let's run Python on this one. Don't be alarmed by the amount of information that's popping up on this side. Again, this has to do with some of the implementations of those libraries I just mentioned. And let me see, do I have a third client? I do not. You know what, let me throw in a third client for this one. Because that's the other thing. In the first example, it's kind of talking between two people, two programs. I want to demonstrate that this can actually be as many programs communicating with each other. And let's go ahead and execute Python client.py. All right, so these are three separate programs. I mean, they're the same program, client.py, but because I have them open or executed on three different command prompts, you could think of them as three separate programs. They're three separate instances of the same program, so they're all independent. Why don't we start off with this one here? Hello. So you'll see that the hello was mimicked to this program and this program. You'll also see that it got mimicked back to myself. Again, that's just the way the server was programmed, and I'm going to move that over here. When this program sends a message, it sends it to the server, and then the server relays it to the other two programs. Now, let me see if I can scroll up and find that message here. All right, so here it is. And so the server itself also mimics the message back to the command prompt. But because you have all this other traffic here, which there is a way of suppressing this so that you only see the things that the server wants to print out, it'll make it easier for you to kind of see pieces of information like this. For right now, we're just going to let it be and just kind of continue on with our example. So let's say hi, because it's been a while and nobody's responded back to me. So you can see that this particular program was able to send another message out there. And we could say, I'm here. So it got mimicked to these two programs. And how are you? And then again, it got mimicked to this one. Again, it also gets mimicked back to myself because that's how the server was programmed. And then we can have this third one here. Sorry, I stepped away. So again, there is no constraints to how the information is being sent and received. Again, these libraries allow for this asynchronous communication of sending information and then simply handling when we get information back. So let's take a short look at the code. Again, I'm not going to dive too deeply into it. That'll be part of the workshop. So let's see what the server is doing. So the server is importing these two libraries. The third library is being used by the client. We have to do some initialization of the Flask library. And then we also have to create our socket IO object, just like we saw in the first preview. Again, I'm not going to go into some of the details of what you're seeing here, but just realize at this point, we've imported the libraries and we've created the necessary objects to do the socket programming. Now, what's different in this example, and you'll see it on the client side too, is how we handle incoming traffic. So you're not going to see a while loop here. What's happening is that we've established a listener that's listening on that socket communication for anything that's coming across a socket route called message. So we have a way of naming our communication across the network. So again, this is going to handle anytime there is some kind of information that's being passed on this message route. So remember, this is the server. So when it receives some information, it prints it out to the console, and then it mimics it back, or I should say it broadcasts it to all clients that are connected to it. And then the last piece of any example that we have is we have to actually now run the program. So this is where you see there is no area where the server can send its own information. Again, not to say that we couldn't program it in, but I created this server to simply act as a switchboard. And that's what it's doing. It receives some information and then simply spits it back out using emit to all of its clients. So now let's see what the clients do. So similar to the other one, we import our library. We need an address to the server. So that's the other thing you'll see here is that the server didn't need to be specified its address like we did in preview 1. The libraries are kind of handling that. There's many different ways of getting the address to your server. Again, all these examples are being ran on the same computer. So if you get your computer's IP address, you're essentially getting the server's IP address. And then this 5000 is that port that we saw on the first example. Again, all examples somehow need to specify this, the actual address and the port. And just to show you, the port's coming from this command right here when we run the socket IO library. All right, so once we've created the link to the server, we've created our socket IO client object. Now we get to this. Again, we want that asynchronous communication. So we also have a function that will handle any information that's coming across the message route. Now, because it's a different library, they implemented their function differently. Okay, this example is using the Flask socket IO because we're running a Flask server. So in their case, they do it like this, socket IO.on. On this side, the name of your function has to be the name of the socket route that it will be listening for information on. All right, so again, once an information comes along the message route, then it simply displays it to the screen. Now we go down to, okay, so we imported our objects, we imported the libraries, we created our objects, we defined a function to handle incoming traffic. So that's the thing. I mean, we have to define a function for our incoming traffic. Now let's see how we do outgoing traffic on the client side. So before we could do anything, we have to connect to the server. Again, this is the client side. And then we have that very similar loop that we had in preview one where, we have a variable message. We ask the user for a message via the console, and we simply emit the message to the server. Again, SIO is our server. So we send our message that we type in from the console to the server on this message route. The server then receives that message, prints it out to the screen, formats it a little bit differently, and then broadcasts the information back to all of its clients. That same information I just built, in addition to the ID of the sender, gets sent to everybody, which is why on the client side, whenever we send a message, we see our own message back because the server's sending it to everybody. There is a way of modifying who the server sends the information to. We could do it here in terms of not sending it back to the same sender, sending it to everybody else but the sender. Or we could also handle, when do we print information out on our end. So we see if we see that the message being sent back to us, it's from us, we could just ignore printing it out. All right, so this is the basis of asynchronous socket communication using those three libraries and I'll bring up the presentation here, of Socket.io, Flask, and Flask Socket.io. Now I want to show you one more little piece before I conclude the video of a party crasher. And I think I have that one right here. All right, so Socket.io or socket programming allows us to communicate with different applications. So I'm going to put here, can I crash the party? So this is a web page that is also communicating with the Python socket server, and it sends information. And like we could have the first client be rude, like no, go away. And we can see here that the information is being mimicked back to everybody, to include the party crasher, which is a web page. So that's another exciting part about socket programming, is that it's not unique to a particular language. It's just a protocol that can be used to communicate between different applications. So hopefully you're excited for the workshop, and enjoy.